So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, hello. It is time to dig into the penultimate episode of the fourth Better Call Saul season, Wiedersehen. So join me as I have another basement breakdown. Okay, Season 4, Episode 9, Wiedersehen. And I'm going to start with the title. Wiedersehen is, you probably recognize it as part of Auf Wiedersehen, a way to say goodbye in German. By the way, I don't know German, so if the stuff I'm about to say is crazy, tell me in the comments. But from my understanding, Wiedersehen is a word that can mean goodbye, as in Auf Wiedersehen, but the word itself means reunion, a meeting again. And I love how this plays out with regard to Werner in this episode and with regard to Kim and Jimmy, but I'm going to start with Werner because I find it so evocative. That moment of him staring at the wall where the word Wiedersehen is spray painted across the rock where they're going to blast. And that moment when he's down there checking the wires and he has this momentary breakdown. And I mean, if you're anything like me, you could feel it with him. This was an intense scene. And just look at Werner staring at that Wiedersehen and thinking, this could be my goodbye. This could be my end. And I'm in this dark pit. Nobody knows where I am or who I am. It's a really dark moment. And the way it plays out for Werner is that Wiedersehen is both a goodbye and a reunion, right? He's so desperate for a reunion with his wife that he says goodbye to Mike and crew. So Wiedersehen has this double meaning for the episode, and it applies to Kim and Jimmy too. And what I mean by that is, the question driving this episode is, now that Kim and Jimmy are up to their old tricks, which we see right away, is it going to cause them to come together, or is this going to be the moment that pushes them apart for good? Is it a reunion, or is it a goodbye? Which shading of the word Wiedersehen is it going to be? And at first it feels like a reunion, right? The Lubbock Building Safety Office heist that Kim and Jimmy pull off. Notice the red and blue along the walls in this opening scene as Kim walks into the office. There's this pretty vivid patch of blue right next to this patch of red. And it just gets again at that notion that Kim is dancing across this line. If blue is the color of law and red is the color of crime, Kim is just sort of dancing across that border between them and using each to benefit her. You know, she sort of dabbles in the underworld of red, but she's applying it to benefit her in her blue, upstanding, legitimate law career.
Mesa Verde? Yes.
She doesn't even need to, though, but she's doing it for the thrill because it makes her feel alive. One thing I want to note about this image of the red and the blue is that they're so compartmentalized, aren't they? They're even, they're orderly. And this picture, to me, informed the discussion with Kim and Jimmy at the diner. Note in the establishing shot at the diner, we have the stripe of blue and the stripe of red on the neon sign outside. Jimmy says to her, he's concocting this story of the future, and he talks about our powers combined, and his hands come together like this. It's a very different image from that compartmentalized red and blue on the wall, right? This is a meshing, a mixing, an intermingling, and Kim's not having it. She says,
I think we should only use our powers for good.
We use our powers for good. And I think Jimmy quite rightly pushes back at well, what is your notion of good? Why is it good if we're pulling this scam on some kindly mother in the planning office to make a bank branch a little bit bigger? No, that's the very job that Kim said she wasn't going to do last week, but now has taken on because she can do it in a way that thrills her. You know, she doesn't have to do the months of legwork to make this happen. What Kim means when she says good is really legitimate, isn't it? She's willing to use these powers, as Jimmy puts them, these powers of concocting stories and pulling off scams to benefit her legitimate career. She has to maintain this public identity as an upstanding corporate lawyer, but she's really alive in this private identity as a scam artist. And Kim's belief is that you can live on both tracks and keep them neatly compartmentalized, a worldview that is challenged a bit in this episode, shall we say. This irks Jimmy a little, doesn't it? That she wants to keep them compartmentalized. His urge is really to have this office together. It comes up in the argument at the end of the episode because he wants Kim basically to go public with him, and he feels that she's resisting this.
Actually, I believe if you look at the supplemental materials, there's a letter from my supervisor.
But let's jump ahead now to the two huge scenes at the end of the episode and watch how this plays out. And just think about the themes that we've talked about over the course of the season here on the breakdowns. Legitimate versus illegitimate, that red versus blue contrast I'm talking about. High status versus low status, right? And also constructing stories. And doesn't Jimmy construct some wonderful stories in this hearing? Except the thing is, as he later says, he doesn't really have to construct them for most of the hearing, right? He's being corny, as he puts it. He's being over the top. But the crazy thing is, as you watch this scene play out, is that everything Jimmy says is not only the right thing to say, but it's pretty much true. It's what he doesn't say that gets him.
Mr. Miguel, what does the law mean to you?
So what does the law mean to you? And Jimmy didn't expect this question. He doesn't have something ready. But I think he surprises the people in the meeting, the viewers, and even himself with the story he comes up with. It comes pouring out of him. And he talks about how much he loved representing his clients and how much he's missed that over the past year. And I think we can sense that all of that is true. But what's missing? Chuck. Even when Jimmy answers the question about how he's supposed to be remorseful for what he's done, note how generic his language is.
Nothing like that will ever happen again.
He just talks about how he'll never do that kind of thing ever again, and it's all talk about himself and how he feels that he acted stupidly. The word Chuck never comes up, right? So this questioner at the end of the table teased Jimmy up with this, what does the law mean to you? And look, you and I know from watching the show all along that Chuck is the law as far as Jimmy is concerned. His whole notion of what the law is has come from Chuck and Chuck's influence on him. And influence, there's the key word, right? Because he gives this great answer to what does the law mean to you, and yet that questioner at the end of the table is not quite satisfied, and she hits him with,
Was there any particular influence on your views?
has there been any influence on your views? And she might as well have said, can you please just say the name Chuck McGill so that we can all be satisfied here? You can tell it's the Chuck question for like the third or fourth time. We know that credit should go to Chuck. And yet Jimmy says credit where credit is due, and he makes up some fluff about American Samoa. It's the one truly insincere moment of the hearing. And because he doesn't tell the story they wanted to hear, that's where he fails. Right? Let's go now to the argument atop the parking garage, the climactic moment of this season. And what a performance here by Bob Odenkirk and Ray Seahorn. I can't believe this is the guy we used to watch on Mr. Show having this deep, raw, emotional argument here on screen. Amazing performances. Note when Jimmy recaps the meeting for Kim here, he basically recaps the whole thing up to that question of who's an influence on you. He knows, maybe not even on the uppermost conscious level, but he knows that's where he fell down, right? Kim detects the missing piece here, right? And when she finds out that Jimmy didn't talk about Chuck, she sort of takes it in for a second, but then finally says,
They read the transcripts. They know what happened, Jimmy. They were waiting for you to say something about it.
So I'm supposed to
they
make a big
read the
hearing.
transcripts. They read the story. Kim is bewildered here because think back to the beginning of the episode and how fluidly and easily they concocted this little story of the idiot brother helping out with Kim's imaginary kid. Jimmy knows how to do this. He knows how to weave a story and say what people want to hear, right? So Kim's standing there thinking, hey, it's the story, stupid. How could you mess that up? You're great at it. But this is the one story Jimmy can't tell. The story about Chuck's influence on him, because it cuts too much to his core. Chuck has told Jimmy all his life, you stay down there. And here's where we get into low and high status, right? Chuck has ingrained in Jimmy, you belong down at the bottom, stay there, don't aspire to anything higher. Jimmy McGill with a law license, the whole notion was anathema to Chuck, right? And Jimmy, as much as he strives to deny it, has internalized that. He believes that he belongs in the low too. And now the board here has reinforced that message to him.
So they turned me down.
And so this argument becomes all about high status, low status. Jimmy calls out Kim for dabbling in the underworld to get some thrills, because she's bored with her life. And his basic argument is, hey, you can't have it both ways. Like, you're living the high life and the low life, and you can't maintain those two separate tracks. But Kim thinks you can. I mean, even think of the gifts she had ready for Jimmy, right? She got ready that yellow mug. She painted the 2 on it, world's second best lawyer again on it. That mug has been a symbol of Jimmy's low status. I'm thinking all the way back to the second season in that scene where Jimmy can't get the cup to fit in the cup holder of his new luxury car that he got at his upscale law job at Davis in Maine, right? A scene that basically told you Jimmy doesn't fit in this high status environment. She's got the mug ready for him, and she's got the briefcase, the monogrammed briefcase ready for him. Sophisticated, high class, very Schweikert and Coakley gift of her, right? Low status and high status. Kim thinks you can have both. Jimmy, though, can't be both up and down. He can't dance the way that Kim does. And the argument progresses to the point where they're talking about this strange moment at the Schweikert and Coakley party from a couple episodes ago. Remember that? Remember the nature of that ugly scene. They're talking about the office retreat, where they should go. And Jimmy keeps raising the stakes, literally raising them. Schweikert mentions Telluride, and Jimmy says, why not Vail? Higher mountain, why not Aspen? Bigger, higher status mountain. Take a private jet, we're up in the sky now. And then Jimmy says in this argument to Kim,
oh, what a mistake it was to take me up to your office in the sky.
What a mistake it was for you to take me up to your office in the sky, as high as we can get. And then Kim says, maybe it was a mistake. Jimmy says, kick a guy while he's down. And Kim says, one of the most striking lines in the whole series,
Jimmy, you are always down.
Jimmy, you are always down. And you get the sense that in this argument, she has realized it. She's talked through all the moments where she's had to pull Jimmy out of the muck. And the basic argument here is, hey, Kim, you get down in the muck with me. And Kim saying, pull yourself up just a little bit. And it's this tug of war that they're never going to win because Jimmy is low for life. Kim's right. He's always going to be low because that's Chuck's #1 message to him, and that's the message that has stuck with him so painfully that he can't even bring himself to say Chuck's name in this hearing or acknowledge that Chuck is a part of him now, right? It's this push and pull between the high status and low status that really dominates both of their lives right now, but they have very different worldviews. Kim says you can choose and you can have them both, and Jimmy basically says, no, you can't, and in any case, I don't deserve the high. I'm made for the low. So is it pushing them apart? Is it Wiedersehen goodbye, or is it Wiedersehen reunion? It sure felt like goodbye until that last scene with Kim and Jimmy, where Kim says, well, we'll start with you wanting to be a lawyer again. But don't you get the sense that it's going to be both? Just the way it was for Werner, both a goodbye and a reunion. I have a feeling that we are setting ourselves up for they come together one last time so Kim can launch Jimmy on his new life, perhaps as Saul, we'll see. But Kim can launch Jimmy on his new life, and then they can say goodbye. I don't see how they stay together at this point because Kim's need to preserve the high status part of her public image just is never going to completely jibe with Jimmy, who wants to live life down in the muck because that's where he thinks he belongs. So that's it. Auf Wiedersehen for now, Basement Breakdown fans. Hey, we got a special treat for you. Next Tuesday, is it Tuesday morning we're going to do it, Jamie? 10:30 a.m.?
Sure.
10:30 a.m. Central Time. Next Tuesday. It'll be on the Twitter, I'll remind you. We're going to do a live Basement Breakdown. My buddy Josh Modell, formerly of the AV Club like myself, will be joining me. And we're going to talk it out with you. We'll get your comments live, and we'll break down not just the last episode, but the whole season. So join us live here on YouTube on the O-Logical channel next Tuesday at 10:30 a.m. Central. We'll do it live. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for joining me. Auf Wiedersehen for now. Talk to you next week.